Dan Markel was a bright and talented young law professor at Florida State University in Tallahassee. He had 2 children with his wife, Wendy Adelson. But Dan and Wendy broke up and entered into a bitter custody battle involving their children. Wendy moved back to South Florida, where her parents and brother lived and ran an incredibly successful dental practice more than 400 miles from Tallahassee. But the custody battle suddenly ended when Dan was gunned down in his driveway. Prosecutors allege an elaborate plot hatched by the Adelson family involving a former shot girl and a couple of gang members. So far, 3 people have been convicted in the plot, but no one from the Adelson family has been held responsible. Tonight, we take a closer look at the evidence and the Adelson family as we try to figure out why Professor Dan Markel was murdered in cold blood. I'm Vinnie Politan. Great to have you with us tonight here on Closing Arguments as we take a look at the murder of a law professor tonight. And I want to begin tonight talking about another case, another trial that is just around the corner here on Court TV. We've been talking about a lot, the Pike County Massacre. This one's out of Ohio. This is an absolutely horrific case. 8 members of one family slaughtered, executed, killed in an alleged elaborate plot to take down this family. And you wonder, why would one family go after another family? Well, in that case, what prosecutors are alleging is a custody battle. And that 4 members of the Wagner family took out 8 members of the Roden family in order to gain custody of a child. That was the motive, the alleged motive, and that trial's coming up. They're picking the jury, they're finishing that up, and you're going to see that trial here on Court TV. Tonight, this hour, similar in a certain respect, another case involving a bitter custody battle between a law professor and his ex-wife, Dan Markel and Wendy Adelson. And it really, the real friction in this breakup was the custody of the children and where the children would reside. Because Dan was an esteemed professor at Florida State University teaching law. And that's in Tallahassee. For those of you not familiar with Florida, that's up near the panhandle of Florida, towards the top of Florida. 400 miles away is where Wendy Adelson is from and where she was going to relocate and wanted to be there with their children. But not very conducive to co-parenting or, you know, dropping them off for weekends, or it just would not work. So it was really fundamentally a big issue in all of this. So what prosecutors allege is this elaborate plot involving at least 4 people, maybe more, in executing the professor, executing a father. And in this case, you've already had 3 people convicted in this case. You've got a woman named Catherine Mcbanawa. She was just recently convicted. You've got Sigfredo Garcia and Luis Rivera. They've all been convicted, but not one Adelson has been held responsible. Not one. And remember, from the beginning, the prosecution theory in this case is that the Adelsons are the ones who hatched the plot, because they're the ones that had the reason to kill Dan Markel, to get him out of the way so Wendy could get the kids and bring them down to South Florida with their uncle and their grandparents. But you see, these 3, all convicted. Catherine Mcbanawa just recently. One took a deal, the other went to trial, was convicted at trial, you saw here on Court TV. So now, finally, after these 3 convictions, finally, someone at the top of this alleged plot has been implicated by prosecutors, charged by prosecutors, and it's Wendy Adelsons' brother, Charlie. Mika Cho, reporter with our great affiliate in Tallahassee, WTXL, has more for us tonight.
I don't know. If a badge comes up to you, tell them have a nice day, officer. Listen, if they want to charge you with something, charge me. If not, I don't talk to cops. Sorry.
This FBI footage recorded in 2016 shows Charlie Adelson and Catherine Mcbanawa having a conversation about the investigation into the murder of Florida State University professor Dan Markel in 2014. It has now been enhanced to give investigators a look into a conversation that took place between the two in South Florida. That same video presented to a grand jury.
This was on the BBC. This was on Good Morning America. This was on New York Times. This was every day.
You can see the two talking about investigators talking to family members, calling the investigation a scare tactic, and the worldwide news coverage the case has had since 2014. Assistant State Attorney Georgia Kappelman said the enhanced evidence is a big piece of what they needed to help their case.
Well, the piece of evidence was something that I did think was important, and I've always felt like if we could just get that clarified, that would make a big difference potentially in the case, so I was really happy to have that piece of evidence to present to the grand jury.
So finally, and again, this is a case that's been bothering me for a while here, because all these people are getting charged, you're alleging this elaborate plot, but the people who would be most responsible, the ones who started the whole thing, planned the whole thing, weren't charged. But now Charlie Adelson has finally been charged. Now, again, at this point, he's presumed innocent. We understand that. But if you're going to, as a prosecutor, allege a plot to murder someone, the people who are thinking the whole thing up should obviously be charged. And now finally, one of them is. I want to bring in a special guest who is joining us tonight from Redwood City, California, a friend of Dan Markel's and a former law professor at the University of Georgia. Jason Solomon is with us. Jason, great to see you again. Thank you so much for joining us. Before we get to all the developments and everything else, I want to start off here because I didn't spend a lot of time talking about it off the top because I wanted you to do it. For people who never met Dan Markel, I want you to tell us a little bit about him, what he was to the legal world as a brilliant mind, number one, but number two, as a friend, as a man, as a father.
Yeah, Dan was a terrific guy. He was very devoted both to his work as a professor, as a scholar, as a teacher. He's someone who connected people like me and other scholars all over the country. He really wanted to build community among scholars and teachers. And then he was just a really devoted father, super devoted to his two young boys. He just didn't want to miss a minute. And he was also a proud Jew. And I think that was something that was really important to him and that he wanted to really pass along to his kids as well.
Do you remember when this breakup was taking place and there was this battle? Did you have conversations with Dan about this? And it's difficult for anyone when you break up, but here you had the added aspect that the Adelsons and Wendy Adelson wanted to take his children 400 miles away.
Yeah, I did talk to him. I was one of several people who talked to him at the time. And one thing that's interesting is Wendy raised this issue with him initially about the two of them moving to Miami, even though they would be divorced. And he seriously considered it. He wanted to make things work for Wendy and her family. And he seriously considered doing it. He would have commuted back and forth to Tallahassee. Would have been a heck of a commute, of course. But with his teaching schedule, he would have been able to make it work. And they still would have been able to split custody of the kids 50-50.
That's mind-blowing, right? Because that is the alleged motive for this entire plot. I want to get your reaction now because I don't think it had happened last time we spoke, but Catherine Mcbanawa, who is sort of that person in the middle of this whole thing who, according to prosecutors, connect the killers with the Adelsons, has been convicted. She's been convicted. Her first trial was a hung jury. She testified. She adamantly said she had nothing to do with this and did not implicate Charlie Adelson in this at all. Your thoughts about the fact that she's now been convicted? How does that change anything in the way that we're looking at this case right now?
Well, justice was served here. I'm very happy that she was convicted. It was a disappointment that she wasn't convicted in her first trial. It's obvious that she was at the center of it. There's no other connection between the hitman who killed Dan Markel and did not know Dan Markel at all. There's no connection between the hitman and Dan Markel other than through this woman, Katie Mcbanawa, who was dating Dan's brother-in-law, Charlie Adelson, at the time of the murder. So it's the only connection. She was obviously in the middle of it. The phone records show it, the influx of cash into her accounts, the checks written by Wendy, the ex-wife's mom, to her for a no-show job. The evidence was just overwhelming, and there was no way to say, oh, this is all a coincidence. I wasn't involved. So I'm happy that she's behind bars. She's not going anywhere.
And now you have the enhanced recordings that seem to connect them after the murder, talking about the murder. I've got to think that is very compelling evidence and would be very compelling for a jury to look at. Why on earth would Charlie be talking to her about the murder unless there was some reason to talk about the murder and all the publicity surrounding it?
I think it is very compelling. I think it was very compelling in the trial of Katie Mcbanawa. I think it will be helpful in the trial of Charlie Adelson. But it's important to remember that the case against Charlie Adelson is so open and shut, you don't even really need that evidence. Think about it. Charlie's own sister, Wendy, the ex-wife whose family is at the center of this, she told the jury and she told police that her brother, Charlie Adelson, had said that he had looked into hiring a hitman.
I think we just lost the connection there for a second. The feed has frozen. But I want to show you folks at home. This is Tara Kawas, who is Catherine Mcbanawa's attorney, talking about the reason, from her perspective, prosecutors went after her client. Again, the allegation here and the conclusion by the jury ultimately was that Catherine Mcbanawa was in the middle of all this, dating Charlie Adelson, and connects him with the hitmen, one of whom Catherine Mcbanawa had a child with. So let's take a listen to what her attorney had to say about all this.
Prosecutorial desperation, members of the jury. They are so desperate to get Charles Adelson that their belief is the only way to get through to him is we have to get to Catherine. They want to arrest her because that's our way to get to Charlie. But they were mistaken because Catherine didn't know. She doesn't have the information that they want. So now, 3 years later, she is sitting here accused of a crime that she did not commit.
And she was offered, the opportunity to take a deal, testify against Charlie Adelson. She would get much less of a sentence, but she's done now. She's been convicted in this murder plot. Jason Solomon's back with us. I want to play that recording, Jason, the FBI recording from 2016. I want everyone at home to hear and listen closely as Charlie Adelson, again, speaking with Catherine Mcbanawa.
To you, tell them have a nice day, officer. Listen, if they want to charge me with something, charge me. If not, I don't talk to cops. Sorry. This was on the BBC. These TVs, this was on Good Morning America. This was on the New York Times. This was a big split.
To me, I mean, Charlie Adelson's got to explain this recording, right, at his trial. I don't know how you explain it. Does he know that she's involved and he wants her to, figure out a way to get around it? The bottom line, that's his brother-in-law. That is the father of his sister's children. And he doesn't want the case solved. He doesn't want the killer brought to justice. To me, I think the jury sees right through that.
I think so. And I think the question at the moment, one question I have is Charlie Adelson's lawyer, who's a very accomplished lawyer, is almost certainly advising him that his chances at trial are nil of getting out of this. He's going to be convicted. And so one question is, does Charlie Adelson have anything to offer? Is he willing to testify against, for example, his mother or his sister? in exchange for a lighter sentence? Or is he going to be the one who goes down for the whole family, even though we have a lot of evidence that his mother involved, and it's fairly likely that both his sister and father were involved as well? But is he going to take the hit for the whole family?
That's a great point, right? You know, at some point, Charlie Adelson's got the rest of his life to live. Where is he going to choose to live it will be the question. And he does, if in fact he's guilty of this, would have inside information on other members of his own family. How about Dan's family? I don't know if you've been in contact with them. How are they holding up these days? And what are your thoughts about them getting that final piece of justice that they're looking for?
Well, it's very tough, as you can imagine, for both his parents and his sister. You know, this case has really involved two horrendous injustices. The main one, of course, is the killing of Dan and the sort of slow march to justice, although I know the prosecution has been very methodical about it, and we appreciate that. The other injustice is after Dan's murder, once it became clear, once the prosecution made clear that the Adelsons were behind it, Wendy, Dan's ex-wife, cut off in-person visits with Dan's parents. And so that's been very difficult for them. They've only had 1 hour of visitation with those boys in the last 6 years. So that's a real injustice as well. It's horrible. And we hope that's something that's addressed soon as well.
That's absolutely disgraceful. Absolutely disgraceful. All right, Jason Solomon is going to stay with us. We're going to talk more about this case. We got more to get to. We're going to talk a lot about Wendy Adelson and her testimony at the trials. Also, coming up in the next hour. In Miami, Florida, Instagram and OnlyFans model Courtney Clenny extradited back to Florida, charged with the murder of her boyfriend. She has a new photo going viral, her booking photo. We have the latest.
Now, Clenny is finding that her fame has a downside.
Yeah, you should go, because you just killed your boyfriend.
A senseless tragedy in small-town America.
This was a pre-planned execution.
It was a feud between families that ended with multiple murders.
Came in like thieves in the night and took 8 lives.
George Wagner faces murder charges in connection with the killing.
Wagner's brother and parents also charged.
It's very much a family affair. All for one, one for all.
It's a chilling story. It will be an intense trial.
The Ohio Family Massacre Trial. Live coverage coming soon on Core.
Florida State law professor Dan Markel was married to a fellow lawyer, Wendy Adelson, in 2006. Together, they had 2 children and lived in Tallahassee, Florida. After 7 years of marriage, Dan and Wendy split up and were divorced. After the divorce, they continued to battle in court regarding custody of their 2 children. Wendy wanted to relocate the children to South Florida, where her parents, Donna and Harvey, and her brother, Charlie, lived. The family had a successful dental practice near Fort Lauderdale known as the Adelson Institute, where all 3 worked. During the custody battle, Dan filed a motion in February of 2014 to prevent his ex-mother-in-law, Donna, from having unsupervised visits with her grandchildren. On July 18th, 2014, Dan dropped his children off at school, went to the gym, and pulled into his garage around 11 a.m. While still in his car, Dan is shot and killed. A neighbor says he saw a Prius pull out of the driveway after the shots were fired. Prosecutors say it was these 2 men, Luis Rivera and Sigfredo Garcia, who were in that Prius and killed Dan. But why would these 2 men drive almost 500 miles from South Florida to Tallahassee to kill a law professor? Prosecutors say they were paid $100,000 by Wendy Adelson's family to commit the murder. Here's how prosecutors say these 2 men are connected to the Adelsons. Luis Rivera, a member of the Latin Kings gang, grew up with and was friends with Sigfredo Garcia. Sigfredo Garcia was in a relationship and had children with Katie Mcbanawa. Mcbanawa, a former nightclub bottle girl, had also dated Charlie Adelson, Wendy Adelson's brother. Prosecutors say Charlie enlisted the help of Katie to hire Garcia and Rivera to commit the murder. They claim payments were made from the family's business to Katie by handwritten checks signed by Donna Adelson, as well as significant amounts of cash. Now, I want to give you a little more insight into this bitter custody battle and what was taking place behind the scenes. This was some evidence in one of the trials where you have an email from Donna Adelson, Wendy Adelson's mother, the grandmother of the children. Okay, here it is. May 3rd, 2013. It's super important for the judge to get the message that this guy is a big bully. A hot temper and verbal abuse is what you need to emphasize that you suffered under his reign. The most important part of your divorce is relocation. I sincerely hope your attorney understands that that is your non-negotiable. Okay, so you can see how involved Grandma is in all of this. Now, I also want to play for you testimony, because Wendy Adelson was given partial immunity to testify in the trial against Catherine Mcbanawa and Sigfredo Garcia. That testimony cannot be used against her in any future prosecution, although she can still be prosecuted for the crime if there's independent evidence. Take a listen to her testimony.
Do you know when you filed for divorce?
I believe it was the fall of 2012.
Okay, 9/10/2012 sound right to you?
That sounds right.
And when you separated initially in the fall of 2012, did you move to South Florida with the kids?
No, I did not.
You didn't go to South Florida with the kids?
No, I did not.
Okay. Was it your desire during that time to move with the children to South Florida?
I would say right then, no, it wasn't.
Are you familiar with a court order ordering you to come back to Tallahassee from South Florida?
I'm not familiar with that.
Okay. When you moved out from the marital home there, you lived at another residence in Tallahassee, is that correct?
I did.
And do you recall the address there?
I do. 3303.
Okay. And was there a time during the time that you were living there that you determined that you would like to move to South Florida with the children?
There was.
All right. And were your parents very involved in trying to facilitate that relocation?
My parents were supportive of me moving to South Florida.
Would you describe your parents as being over-involved in your personal business?
As compared to other people's parents?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Come on now, Wendy, come on. All right, let's bring back in our guest. Still with us, Dan Markel's friend, Jason Solomon. And joining us now in Los Angeles, California, forensic psychiatrist, trial expert witness, and columnist of Inside the Criminal Mind, Dr. Carol Lieberman is with us. Dr. Carol Lieberman, just your reaction to Wendy Adelson there. I mean, to me, come on. We read the email, first of all, so the jury will know about all of that. But her parents obviously driving this ship in this relocation, in this marriage breakup.
Yes, obviously. You know, she is using her knowledge and experience as a lawyer to avoid and get around, swirl around the various questions. I did watch her testimony, and it gets even worse in certain, when she's interrogated by a male attorney, she squirrels around even worse. And what it made me think of was if Amber Heard had a law degree, this is what she would be like. Very unlikable, very not credible. You know, really, I think that the jury is really not going to like her and certainly not going to believe her.
So, Jason, you know, when you talk about how and why your friend Dan was shot and killed, to me, there's compelling evidence here. These two guys who committed the murder, one of whom admitted to doing it, had no connection here. They had no reason to drive 500 miles. There's only one reason, and they're from South Florida. Who else is from there? I mean, 2 + 2 = 4 sometimes. But I think the toughest part of this equation for the public to accept is how long it's taken first to charge one Adelson and to only charge one Adelson at this point. Do you think it's possible that there will be more charges for more Adelsons even if Charlie doesn't cut a deal?
I do. I think it's very likely that Donna Adelson, the mom, will be the next one charged, the grandma, essentially, of Dan and Wendy's kids. I think what the prosecution is doing is they're being fairly methodical about it. They're going one by one. Of course, there's the speedy trial rules, and so you have to, as soon as you charge someone, try them within a certain period of time. And so they're going after each one by one. So first they tried Katie Mcbanawa. Shortly before the most recent Katie Mcbanawa trial, they arrested Charlie Adelson so they could get ready to try him next. And I suspect after Charlie either pleads guilty or is convicted, which he certainly will be if he goes to trial, the evidence is overwhelming, then they will charge Donna Adelson. Let's also keep in mind there is as much or more evidence against Donna Adelson than there is against Charlie Adelson. Donna Adelson, number one, was the one with the motive, as is evidenced in those emails. She's the one who wanted her family all together so she could have access to her grandkids. She has grandkids with the older son, but she's estranged from her older son because she meddled in his life too much. And not only that, but Donna Adelson is the one, as you referenced earlier, who wrote checks to Katie Mcbanawa immediately after the murder as if she were an employee of the Adelson Dental Institute. There's no dispute that she was not an employee of the Adelson Dental Institute. No one ever saw her there. And so Donna Adelson was right in the middle of this, and the prosecution, given all the evidence they've presented against her, has to charge her, and I think they will either just before Charlie's trial or just after.
And you know, Dr. Carol Lieberman, this is so similar to the allegations in this upcoming trial on Court TV, the Pike County murders, where again, it's the mother, you know, sort of allegedly pulling the strings here, getting this whole thing in motion and not just battling it out in a courtroom or coming up with some sort of compromise, but, you know, planning and plotting a murder. Those are these allegations. It's unreal. Where does that come from in a mother?
Well, you know, it's the mother hen, you know, wanting to sort of grandmother children, you know, wanting that bond, wanting to keep their chicks together. But, you know, and that was the thing that Dan did that really kind of tipped this over when he tried to take the children, stop the grandmother from seeing the children. You know, that is what really got her to be so angry and both of these mothers or grandmothers feel that they're above the law. That's what's so interesting in the Pike case and in this case, even though they're very different. I mean, you know, here they didn't go and kill 8 people, but the mothers have this sense that, you know, they can do whatever. They're in their own little world and they want their kids or their grandkids and they're going to get them back.
Dr. Carol Lieberman is going to stay with us for the rest of the hour. But Jason Solomon, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. Always great to speak with you. And again, I feel bad for your loss of your friend, Dan. And if you speak with the family, please send our best to them.
Thank you.